Welcome to Real Chat with Kat, the podcast that's all about real conversations for real transformation. I'm your host, Kat Pulcinelli, professional speaker, MC, and best-selling international author. Here, we tackle the tough stuff, the mud that we all have found ourselves in. We talk about the pivots, the challenges, and the victories that shape our lives and our businesses. From overcoming trauma and finding your voice to navigating life's unexpected twists, we get raw, honest, and open. You'll hear from inspiring guests who share their stories of resilience, healing, and growth. Whether it's breaking through emotional abuse, embracing self-worth, or thriving in entrepreneurship, you'll find connection, empowerment, and the tools to keep you moving forward. So grab your favorite drink, settle in, and get ready for stories that hit home and conversations that make a difference. Let's get real together. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Real Chat with Kat. I am so excited to have you here with me today, and I have an amazing guest, and I am so excited to bring her to you guys. I think that this conversation is going to be so fulfilling, so supportive, and I think that you're going to find twigs of inspiration and motivation and connection as well. So, Laura, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. Yes, I am so excited. Loved our conversation before we got on here and learning all the things that you have been through and what's kind of led you to where you're at now. So please do us all a favor then and tell everybody who you are and what it is that you do.
Yes, so I'm Lara Waldman. I'm also known as the Wealth Accelerator. I'm the author and podcast host of Money Manifestation Mastery. And I've been a healer, channel, and spiritual coach for over 2 decades. And I'm fiercely passionate about helping people transform their inner blocks to creating outer wealth, and wealth, not just financially, but in every area of life. That is me in a little nutshell.
I love that. And I know that you have your own journey that kind of led you through this as well. And I love that you also create this space of the spiritual connection as well, because I know that especially for me, I was very good at being very logical. And if it wasn't logical, that was the end of it. And over the last several years, working with my own spiritual coach, I learned so much about how we are interconnected into so much more than what we understand. And there is so much more presence in who we are and how we feel that ends up being a part of all of these other pieces that happen in our life. And I don't know, this is fascinating to me. And so I'd love your take on it as well. And how you went through things and then how this you feel like what you do ties into the money piece as well, because I know you have several integral parts.
Mm. Yeah. So, and it's very obviously very normal to be very logic and data driven. And in fact, I've been a bit the opposite, where I've been all because I've been in this sort of spiritual self-development wellness space for
Hmm.
30 years personally. And actually I had to learn the almost like the opposite, how to get like more logical and data
Oh,
driven.
nice.
Yeah, so it's quite funny. But my story's kind of a long one. I basically had a spiritual awakening when I was 18. I'm now 46. And I at that time I was really struggling with, physical health problems. And at the time I didn't realize, but now I would say mental health and emotional health
Mm.
issues. I was a hot mess. I was really all over the place. Um, I grew up very privileged, very wealthy. I didn't know I was wealthy because there was a lot of lack and scarcity in my parents, but it wasn't really until I was 30. I was like, wait a minute, I grew up really wealthy. What's all this like poverty consciousness? So, grew up sailing and skiing and trips to Europe, and everyone around me had money and usually often more money than we did. So that was just normal to be around that. That was my normal. And I guess it's all relative, isn't it? if some, whatever amount of money you have, or however many things you have, if someone has more than you, you're going to feel like you don't have as much. So kind of
Mm-hmm.
my joke was we were members of the Royal Vancouver Yacht Club. I'm from Vancouver, Canada. This private members club, and we had a sailboat that was 42 feet, and we'd go to these outstations, these little islands, and what would rock up next to us is like 150 foot,
Oh gosh.
like huge, like basically an apartment on the water. So we'd feel like, oh, we're like these poor little sailors in a 42. But yeah, so it was just like, it's sort of embarrassing to admit that. But I used to think, oh my God, we're like the poor sailors and they're like the really rich people.
Mm.
So that I grew up thinking we didn't, we're just like lowly little people. But turns out we were quite well off, thank you. But what happened was then I went through, so everything was like picture perfect on the outside. And
Mm.
we were trained to be picture perfect, right? Be pretty, smile, be smart, like excel, like get straight A's. So it was all very much about external looks, external achievements. And there wasn't any, from my point of view, kind of any emotional health or spiritual health going on inside. And then when I was 14, I got home one day and my mom had left.
Mm.
Basically, everything just kind of blew up. Our picture perfect life kind of came to the surface after a traumatic event of my godmother committing suicide, and it was my mom's best friend, and it just like pulled the floor out. Now, probably what I'd say is she was going through perimenopause. We didn't know about hormone stuff then. So
Oh
there was a
yeah.
lot of all the facade just like pulled out, and the truth came out, which was shadowy, it was traumatic, it was violent. And it really created some deep trauma in me, but I didn't know that I had trauma for quite a long time. So what happened was is I shut down my deep abandonment wound. I went into self-destruction. I got into drugs and alcohol. I was really promiscuous. I was making very bad decisions. And then I went into a deep depression, developed eating disorders, withdrew from everyone, was in the most horrendous kind of self-harm,
Mm.
mostly mentally, but also physically. And then, but something in me kind of started waking up. I like there was a seeking part that started to come through. And I now would say because of my trauma, I started disassociating. And I would say I was kind of finding connection outside of my body and started waking up to spirituality and consciousness. I started reading books about it. My joke was with like a joint in my mouth. I was like getting stoned while like tripping out. And I was like all looking like into the universe. And then when I was 18, I sat and tried meditation. And then I had my first spiritual awakening where I had a vision of basically what I do now, but I didn't know what I do now was a thing. So I saw myself being interviewed on television, talking through about consciousness, and my brain went, "Oh, you're going to be a famous actress." And in that moment, I was at university at that point. I was in a very deep depression, which again, I didn't realize. I couldn't really function at university. I wasn't able, like, I wasn't even going to class or whatever. And I quit. I quit university and went
Mm.
all in on acting. And then that then brought me over to London, England, where I went to theater school, went to drama school. And so I was like 100% all in, going forward into this thing. And at this point, I had this real spiritual connection. It was like this little flame had woken up in my heart, but still filled and riddled with deep self-hate and, really bad digestive issues. Mentally, emotionally, physically, I was still a hot mess, but there was this little flame and this connection to my spiritual self, or this vision that was driving me forward. And then when I came to London, England, I was 21 at this point. Um, I had a really hard time when I was here in London, still here in London, and I met my now husband, who was super calm and super cool, and he meditated twice a day. And I thought, oh my God, I need to meditate, but I don't want to. And everything in me just like couldn't bear the thought of sitting and meditating. But I forced myself because there was that little voice again, that little, I call it my inner guidance system. My intuition was talking to me saying, like, you must meditate. Hated it, but forced myself to sit and meditate for 20 minutes. And after, I'm not sure how long it was, if it was a few weeks or a month, but I remember at one point, this is my spiritual awakening part two. Everything suddenly got really still, really peaceful, really clear. And then I got my next download or my next message. I heard it through my inner hearing and I saw it through my inner vision with my eyes closed. And it said, "You are a healer." Like this. It was super dramatic.
Wow.
And all I remember is I freaked out and I just collapsed in the fetal position and I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed and I sobbed. Because in that moment, I knew I wasn't going to be an actress. And I was
Mm.
going at that point, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, like hyper focused on that. And I also didn't know what a healer was. And I was so upset. I was so devastated. I was so angry. And I was like, all right, universe, whatever this voice is, I don't know what a healer is. I'm really pissed off, but I'm not going to look for it. You need to bring it to me. And then within 6 months, it all just went do, 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 do. And within 6 months, I was working as a healer and working with my first clients. And so that was, yeah, a bit of like an interesting and sort of wild ride following what I call the guidance of my soul or my higher self or source. Um, and that's when I really started going all in on the spiritual side of things. But at that point, I started my business. I was 23. So I was still quite young. I was always the youngest in the room at all these like spiritual workshops and conferences and things. Yeah, so I've been in this game for a little while. So that was part two.
I love this though. And I want to thank you so much for bringing up that, while your family, as you found out later, was well off, but you kind of saw it as poverty. Like to me, it's really interesting to hear it from this point of view because you hear so many people that speak to, well, those that have money have it better, and those that are well off get this, and they don't have to deal with that. Yet you had your own traumas and your own tribulations and your own journey that you had to go on that obviously wasn't very pretty. There was a
No.
lot of things that you had to learn to deal with. And so it just comes to show that it doesn't matter what you come from. Every single one of us has a journey that we are supposed to go on. And just because you see from the outside that picture perfect that somebody puts externally doesn't mean that you understand what is going on behind closed doors, regardless of the amount of money. But you hear this so many times, especially with those that do have you know, a low mindset or this poverty mindset or money isn't enough mindset. Like you hear that. And I know I used to be one of those people as well, right? Well, the wealthy are fine. Like they've got everything they need. I'm never going to be able to get to that point. Like I remember saying things like that. And it's really interesting how much the way that we use those words really end up hindering us more than what we're trying to externally validate to say that that's the reason why. And so I just want to thank you for bringing this perspective up as well. And I'm hoping that the audience is hearing this and getting a little bit of a different shift and understanding of like for you, what you saw was still your version of we don't have enough, right? Even though it's on a different scale than what somebody else might see, you through your eyes still saw the same thing that somebody else who maybe had nothing would see as well. And I think that that for me is very eye-opening. And I want people to hear that and understand that because again, we put ourselves in different classes and in different places depending on where somebody's money status is at. And I think that we need to stop defining each other as a money status.
Yeah, and what happens is you create separation between yourself and wealth
Mm-hmm.
and between yourself and money. And I do a lot of coaching. I over 2 decades now, I've coached people at every level of like wealth and business. So I was, people on benefits, like all the way up to like, 8 figures plus. And what's so interesting to me is whatever level of wealth I'm dealing with coaching, it's the same shit in our brain, It's like it's incredible to me because I used to be like, okay, there's not enough money, so you're poor, you're on benefits, you're broke. And then when I'm talking to people that everyone on the outside would judge to be wealthy and privileged, it's the same story of not enough and lack and scarcity. And that's what I grew up in. It really, like, particularly my dad was an accountant, but so much scarcity, so much fear. It was like we're going to die. It felt like we were absolutely fine. Like we always had food, we always had housing, we always did have holidays as well. So it was, privileged foundation, but it was the energy or the consciousness behind it was very much around lack and not enough and fear. And so for me, this is really the work that I do now is yes, there's outer wealth and there's money in the bank and all of that, which is important, which is around education, because it's actually money is actually really simple. It's not complicated. That's part of this whole thing is but really working on your inner game. And it's extraordinary to me. So it's not our relationship with money partly has to do with money itself, but it's actually not really about money. And so this is the work that I do, which is more about wealth and your relationship with wealth and your inner wealth and your outer wealth. So it's a long conversation, but it's obviously when someone's struggling financially or struggling to pay the bills or in survival, they'll be like, screw you, Lara. I'm really challenged here. And I get it. Like when you're really in the pit of survival,
Yeah.
This conversation is going to be incredibly annoying. But the point being is our mindset and our relationship with money is part of our experience of it. And it's not all of it because there's the practical earning and making money, and learning how to do that. But the inner game for me is so important. And that's my big passion. Because what happened to me was that once I had my spiritual awakening, I like to call it, and I started getting into the world of energy. So I'd at this point, when I was 23, I'd had all these health problems. So I started learning about natural health. I started learning about food and like cutting out things like sugar and alcohol and gluten. And I was learning about gut health. I was learning about healing with food. And that was really important. I learned a lot about that. And it's still very important. But I still couldn't shift the problems I was experiencing physically. They'd get better, but they wouldn't go. And I was in a lot of physical discomfort with like gut health and all of that. And when I started doing the spiritual work, obviously I was trying to heal and help all my clients, which I was. But at the same time, what I was learning was the connection between our physical health or our physical world and the connection between our emotions, the connection between our mind, and then the connection between our soul or our higher self or God or the universe, whatever you want to call it, and the connectedness of all of it. And the pain or problem we're experiencing in the physical world will be bridging and mirroring something else on a higher level, emotionally, mentally, but also spiritually, which is around your soul's journey and the deeper purpose of why you're going through everything that you're going through. And when I started to work on the higher levels and understanding what was going on, that's when I really started to shift and heal my physical health with the support of diet, of course, and all of that as well. And this is where I experienced like miraculous shifts for myself and my clients, was that there is another level of this game that we can't see, that doesn't make any logical sense, right? It's not logical data. It's really interesting and also confusing because it's very different. So what happened then though, I was like, okay, it's all about the soul. It's all about spirit. It's all about the heart. And I was having these experiences of feeling love and home and peace and connection in a way I've never felt since I was like a little girl, out in nature. I realized I didn't ever feel loved. I was technically loved, but I didn't feel loved and supported and cared for. When you're abandoned by a parent, there's a real core wound of like, if your parent can leave you, it's like, well, it's like having the floor pulled out from under you. There was like a nothingness inside of me. And I sought outside of myself for connection. And it was heaven. So I thought, this isn't about money. This isn't about the physical world. I completely rejected, I didn't realize this at the time, but I rejected the physical world. So
Interesting.
it doesn't matter. So I was like, it doesn't matter. I was very good at taking care of my physical body, but I didn't care about clothes. I didn't care about, and actually I never really did, like, and I still don't, to be honest, like all the brand stuff. I don't really care. I didn't care about who you were. I just cared about who you really were. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't into status, I wasn't into celebrity. And I was just like, it's just about heart and soul. And I've always actually been like that, and I'm still like that. But what happened was, is I was having these profound spiritual experiences and really doing some very deep healing work and creating extraordinary results for my clients. They'd come to me with all sorts of problems, and I'd help them navigate it through the lens of their soul and heart. And it absolutely beautiful, absolutely stunning. But it wasn't until, so my spiritual awakening part 3, I got pregnant accidentally when I was 26. Accidentally, we know how babies are made. I wasn't planning on it. And I was 26. I wasn't, that wasn't my plan.
Hmm.
But I actually, my soul was like, this is the right thing to move forward with. And I started dreaming about my daughter, and I was like, okay, I'm definitely having this baby. And so had her, which is a huge part of my healing journey, which is probably for another time, but becoming a mother, went all in,
Mm,
wanting to really heal. And I remember at that moment going, the buck stops with me. Like, I am going to do everything in my power to not hand over this generational trauma to my child. Because at that point, I was like, this pain, these problems, this is generational. This isn't just from my experience.
yeah.
And so I was all in on like trying to be the best mother I could be full time with the girls. And I got pregnant again. I had my second daughter about 3 years later. And when I was 32, my youngest was 2. At this point, we were so broke. And my husband did have a job that he enjoyed, but it didn't even cover the bills. And I was very in la la land, like in my spiritual world, going, it's all going to work out fine, like la 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 la. And I think that's this slight shadow of privilege because I had a foundation of wealth and money. I think there was something in me that was like, it's going to be fine because it always was fine
Mm,
until
that
it
makes
wasn't.
sense.
Yeah, so that's this sort of like, and I was a bit like, where are all my things? Like, because I sort of assumed it would be there because that was my normal. And it wasn't until I was like trying to replicate what I grew up with, I was like, oh my goodness. That's when I realized we were quite wealthy because I was thinking, I can't even afford like childcare. We couldn't afford to go on holiday. We couldn't afford a car. We couldn't afford anything. Um, and at that moment, we were in a really bad spot financially. And I remember collapsing on the sofa going, I just remember there was like crap everyone with like little kids. It was just constant mess and feeling so overwhelmed and so exhausted and dropping down. And I was like, I'm here with this big purpose. I'm supposed to be doing so much more than this. I'm stuck at home with 2 little babies with no support, no money. What? And I said, what is going on with money in this planet? And then that is when the very first time I ever even thought about money in a conscious way. I just like completely rejected it. And then for the next 2 years, I went on a really deep transformational journey, an inner journey, talking to my soul, my higher self, my inner guidance about money and wealth and abundance. And I was on a training because what I didn't know, the thing with money and money blocks is they're often subconscious. Our relationship with money is usually kind of in the underworld. And what I had no idea of was just this mountain of negativity around money. And
Mm,
I had just rejected it. I was like, it's not important. But turns out it's very important, but it's not everything, right? Um, and that's when I started learning about money, and I started learning about business, and I started understanding I needed to bridge the world. So that at that point, my soul self was like, okay, Lara, you pendulum swung from wealth without soul and heart. Then you went into soul and heart, the wealth of soul and heart without money. Now spectrum is that great. Are you ready to integrate both money and spirituality, heart and business, and like this process that I now call integrated wealth, inner wealth, bridging outer wealth. And this
mm.
big passion now because you can have all the money and feel terrible. You can have all the spirituality and be super broke and frustrated and unable to like do anything. So I'm like, can we have it all? Yes, thank you.
That's so beautiful too. And I love how you talk about being able to like make this connection and realizing that subconsciously you had really kind of like rejected money
Yeah.
altogether and not even realized it, right? Like when you were talking about being kind of disconnected from like the physical world, and I'm the same way. Like clothes have never really mattered to me and stuff, but I did the same thing for a really long time where because I never had enough for such a long time, I just like was like, I'm done. Like, I'm just gonna do for my kids and like it is what it is. But I realized that I kind of went through something very similar when it came to you have to be able to click all the pieces together. When you used the visual of the 3 tiers of the things that you go through in this thread that puts everything in between. What I visually saw was when we are stuck in one of those areas, it's a knot that we need to untangle in order to get up for that string to be completely, or that thread to be completely open. And one of the things that I kept hearing you say, and I've heard a couple of people use this as well, is sometimes you talk about money, but then you also talk about this inner wealth. And I'd love to know what the difference is for you when you're using those words, because I know that words have power, and a lot of people tend to use money as that, but I keep hearing you come back to wealth as if it's something completely separate from money.
Yeah, well, they're interconnected, but there's bridging your inner wealth and your outer wealth. And to me, there's money in the bank, right? Which is I see money as a real neutral energy. And it's kind of a in service to, and it's, maybe exchanging value, but it's kind of a neutral energy, or it's a tool, or it's a resource. Wealth to me is a very different thing. And there's the practical. I don't teach like how to manage your money or how to like invest and all that stuff. That's the practicals, which generally are actually really simple. Once you clear all the cloud of money, stress, and overwhelm, it's actually boring. You know, building wealth and money is actually boring. It's because it's so simple. And that what I'm like, it's like this big sort of, you know, boys club where it's like you cannot enter. It's too complicated for you, little girl. This is too advanced. It's like such BS. And it's been a way to kind of create separation. It's very simple, but it's also a bit boring. And it needs focus and it needs leadership. And there's making money, creating value to get money, all of that stuff. There's lots of ways to make money. But wealth to me is well, different thing. There's your outer wealth, there's the money wealth, which is
Mm-hmm.
about financial wealth and what that means for you. I've got, that's my relationship with financial wealth has grown and evolved over years. The inner wealth piece is the work that I do, which is connecting to your inner wealth, which is around your value and connecting to who you truly are, which is a naturally abundant being who has innate worth and innate value and innate deservability because you exist. And it's like, it's a birthright to me. And it's also who you are. So I call it your wealth frequency. And this part of you is totally interconnected with all of life. It knows it's not separate from anything, source, the universe, money, any of it. It's interconnected with all of life. And it knows how to create and it knows how to co-create. And it's here on planet Earth to experience and to know itself. And I see it very much like a seed of consciousness. So I call your wealth frequency your money tree. If you think of a seed knows how to grow. You don't have to tell it what to do. You don't have to control it. What it needs to grow is the right environment, right? It needs the right soil, it needs sun, it needs the right moisture. It will grow with the right support and environment.
Mm.
With your wealth and your wealth frequency, it's exactly the same. You need the right support and right environment in order to grow and thrive. But what's happened, particularly in this world, in this Western world, we're so disconnected from who we are that we don't know. And we look outside and we've been told what to do and how to be, and we've like cut off our legs. We don't have roots into who we are. So your
Yeah.
wealth frequency knows how to grow, it knows how to create, it also knows its value, it's full of joy and pleasure and possibility, and it will keep growing even through the like hard stuff if it's supported. And so to that inner wealth to me is the source of creation, and it's also how we manifest, but we're not taught about this. And it's incredibly powerful and incredibly sensitive, and it will not reject anything that's good for you. So it knows what to take in and it knows what's not right for it. And this is about deep, deep listening. And 100%, it's not going to say no to money. It's not going to say no to outer wealth. Why would it? But it will
Mm-hmm.
get clear on what is valuable and important to you. So, for example, with wealth, what I love doing is really holding space for people to get clear on what is wealth to you? What is a wealthy life to you? Because for someone, it's handbags and brands. For someone else, it's travel. For someone else, it's time and space. For someone
Mm,
else, it's family. For someone else, it's, I don't know, it could be all sorts of things. There isn't one version of wealth. And this is what's so important to really tune into what is it for you, not just the surface level visual of it, like a sports car or designer clothes. That can definitely, that's fine if that's what turns you on and lights you up. But when you really listen, it's like, what is it for me? And that's what's beautiful. And then we want to tap into that inner wealth to start building and creating your outer wealth. And that, I talk about the wealth pillars. Like, what is a truly wealthy life for you? Money, finance is one pillar. But then there's
mm.
then there's body and health, then there's relationship, then there's, experiences that, but in the core, it's like who and how are you being, which is the core of the pillar. So that's how I play this game, how I've been guided to play this game. And it's been quite an interesting road to sort of, you have to do a lot of unlearning to sort of come back into connection. There's so much misinformation out there around
Oh,
it.
yes.
Well, it's crazy. Like a lot of this is pulling back so much of the layers that keep you in separation. So does that make sense, to answer your question?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And what it does is I feel like it kind of separates when I'm thinking about it logically, which I know a lot of the listeners are kind of like in that in-between space, is we have been taught to define wealth as it is still money, right? And then the wealth is the things that you get to have because of it, which is the way that you are speaking about it. Wealth is an entire being of its own, and the way that it is connected to you, how you want to perceive the world, how you want to receive the gifts that the world have to give to you. And that creates your world of wealth, which for some people may not necessarily mean I want to be a millionaire, right? It could mean that they do want that inner peace. They do want safety. They do want family. They do want time, and that becomes their wealth, but that doesn't make them poor. This is something completely separate from it. So that was the reason why I asked you, because I love this definition and understanding of it, because it is something that we are not taught. We are taught everything that you can hold on to, right? The materialistic aspects, the amount of money that is in your bank. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that when I learned to step back from the logical stance and all of the misinformation that we have been taught, and all of the belief systems that you may grow up with, from money doesn't grow on trees to you have to work yourself to death if you want to make it, to most business owners fail, so why would you try? Like all of these things that are out there, which are people's own beliefs because of their perspective of things that they have gone through, but it doesn't mean that it has to be yours. And that's the big piece that I want this audience to hear is we always have the choice. We get to choose how we experience things. We get to choose what is important in our lives, and we get to choose those beliefs that have been so heavily ingrained in us for such a long time. And when you start to see that all those things in front of you are an actual choice and you get to decide to move forward with that or not, for me, that was like, it was like this bright light of possibility, right? It was this ability to be like, oh, so I could try this and I might do that. And what if I wanted to see what this felt like? You get to the point to where you start to enjoy your experiences, and your experiences are then what create that space for wealth, like you're talking about that inner wealth, versus what we are taught, which is the external places, right? What's in the bank account, what somebody can provide for us, what we can purchase. And I think that, in a sense, like you were saying earlier, it's kind of like this boys' club, right? There's like this big secret. And I love that you explain it in this way that it's really not as complicated as you think. And it also means that there's a lot of inner work that you have to do so that you become who it is you want to be and can dream in the way that you want to be, so that you can experience wealth in the direction that you want to be able to experience it.
Yeah, amazing. Exactly. And that's about getting really clear of what's important to you, what your values are. And I think everyone needs like basic, comfortable living. So it would be like, what do you actually need to feel in a way with a lot of money work? It's about feeling safe and secure. People
Mm-hmm.
say they want freedom, and I've obsessed about what is freedom really? Because freedom with a lot of people who aren't grounded is a bit like being a tumbleweed, or a
Ooh.
plastic bag in the wind. So we talk about freedom. I don't want to be tied down. I don't want to be limited. I want to be able to do whatever I want to do. But the practical reality is we need to root down, a bit more like being a tree that can kind of move. Um, and what is true freedom to you? And part of that, I think, is having our basic needs met, like food, clothing, housing, having opportunities. And what is that sort of baseline for you that would make you feel relaxed, that would allow you
Mm-hmm.
to out of survival into thriving. But that also is an inner game thing because I coach a lot of people that I have to remind them, I'm like, you are okay. Like I know their financial reality, like you are fine. But their brain is telling them that it's like they're dying, catastrophizing, because our survival brain will be firing, telling us we're not okay. In that, to be honest, isn't really to do with money in the bank. It can be very much part of the reason why someone might be in a survival fear. But I know people with plenty of money who still do that. So it's like, this is the bit about that you can control. It doesn't always
Mm-hmm.
feel like you can. So a lot of it is about peace of mind. We want to feel relaxed. We want to feel safe. We want to
Yep.
feel possibility. We want to feel like there's agency. And in a way, it's quite simple. Most people tell me quite similar things of what they really want in their wealthy life. Um, so that's the really important thing is getting clear. But there's so much being pulled in a million directions, being told like who we are and what we should want and what we should do, and we're not
Yep.
taught to listen to ourselves and trust ourselves and follow our inner guidance. And there's so many things pulling us out of our center and our creative power. So this is really about, turning off all the noise and going within and creating space to really connect to yourself. And
Mm-hmm.
it's getting busier and busier out there, isn't it? It's noisier and noisier.
So noisy, so noisy. Now, and this is something that I want people to really hear and understand of the ultimate control and the ability of control is very different than how we think the control is, right? The control of your mind and how it functions and how it thinks is, to me, 10 times better of control than like when I was trying to control my schedule or control what was being done on certain days and with my kids and like being able to ebb and flow with that and knowing that I have control of how my mind thinks about things or how my mind goes down a rabbit hole of what is happening and being able to kind of pull it back in the direction of positivity, right? The direction of like, okay, it's fine. Like nobody's gonna die. We didn't make it to the store. We can probably order online. Like being able to have control to use that has helped me so much more than any of the outer control that I tried to have in my life for such a long time. So, my question to you is for those that, are intrigued by this, that are like, okay, I knew there was something different. It's not just all about the physical. What kind of advice would you give them to help them just start to understand down the road of of what you were teaching?
Well, so again, we have to get out of the logic into the feeling. And this is where it's a little bit hard. We need to bridge both, by the way. It's really important that there's the spirit and the soul and the energy world, and then there's the logic and the data and the facts and the ground, right? We need to bridge both. So both are required. But what I say is that your logical mind, the mind should be in service to the heart. So,
Ooh.
there's a lot of spiritual practices where you kneel and you bow down. And so for me, what's happening with that is we're putting the head to the earth. So we're calming the mind, we're tuning in and listening. And I feel like the mind should be in service to the heart, in service to the body. It's like a servant rather than a leader. The leader, I call it your luxurious leader within, or your wealth frequency. We want to connect to that inner wealth to be the leader, which is, I call it your heart, body, soul aligned wealth, or your heart, body, soul aligned wealth consciousness. It's very different to survival brain, control brain, like micromanaged brain, right? And they need to work together. They're a team, but we want to create space for deep listening. Now, the challenge of that is if we're in survival, like we're in lots of thoughts and lots of busyness and lots of like, it's like do, rush, 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 go, go, go. So for me, the practice is going within. So I've got a very simple sort of daily practice as part of your, money manifestation mastery method. And it's a lot about creating, I call it sacred space to be still. And you can do a bunch of things in there. You can journal, you can meditate, you can move your body, but we're dropping in and tuning in and listening. And in that process, we want to connect and listen. So my step one to money manifestation mastery is relax. Easier said than done, right? But we want to relax. I remember my guidance was teaching me this. My inner guidance would be like, "Lara, you need to relax." I was like, "You need to chill." I was like, "But I got a million and one things to do. What do you mean chill? What do you mean relax?" Relax.
So felt that.
It was so funny. And my guy just be like, "Go for a walk." I'm like, "What do you mean go for a walk? I'm trying to make money. I'm trying to so I used to I was really in an argument with my inner guidance for years because I was not the best client. I was like fighting back a lot. But what I learned was step one, relax, because when you relax and drop in, then we release. And it's a bit doing, it's like all that buildup, that mental and emotional buildup is like being energetically constipated. You need to clear and cleanse every day, right? Clear the toxic waste out physically, yes, as well as emotionally and energetically. We're like an energy sponge. So we want to create space to release what is not yours, right? The noise, the points of views, all that comes at you. Release and then connect deeply. I call it embody your wealth, where you're really dropping into what it is that you want, what's really important to you, getting into alignment, getting into connection. So this is part of a daily practice because our brains are going to be going. My brain goes, I know this inside out and upside down. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I have to do this every day still because my brain will still go into anxiety, into catastrophizing, into overwhelm, into, story. It's sort of, I used to go into a story about that, but now I just realize, oh, that's just our survival system. And when we're in the unknown or when we're on the brink of change, which when I'm playing this game, it's all the time, So it's like when you're up against the edges of something you haven't done before, something new, this really stresses our brain out. It's to calm it down so we can connect and listen. And so I choose every day to let the consciousness of my heart, body, and soul to lead me and guide me. I've learned to develop a relationship with it where I've learned to trust it. And I think the other thing is we're not taught to listen and trust our intuition. And it's about developing a relationship with that part of you and trust that it's going to work. And sometimes I think I am like super crazy because I'm like, this is so illogical. This doesn't make any sense. And I've just learned that I've just learned to trust it because it always leads me to greater things and it always leads to greater outcomes. So you need space to connect, space to listen, space to develop a relationship with yourself. And then, the courage to listen and to take little tiny baby action steps from that place. If nothing else, you'll feel a bit calmer, a little bit more.
Definitely. Definitely. I can totally attest to that one from someone that never touched meditation or doing anything to calm my mind. One of my favorite things to do is just sit outside, set a timer on my phone, like at lunch, flip my phone over and just hear everything that is around me. And it used to be really weird at first. And now I like wait for the moment when I get a chance to do it because it really is so calming. And the ability to be able to think so much clearer with whatever it is that I have to do next comes so much easier, like so much easier. It is definitely, but like you said, it's a daily practice. It's something you constantly have to do. I laugh at myself sometimes with the stupid thoughts that come through, and I'm like, really? That's what we thought about with that one? Like it's funny to me, but again, you're able to hear that and recognize it. So now you have a chance to shift and choose to focus on something else, to believe something else versus the survival piece that our brain is so hyper focused on. So,
What I want to say as well is with connection, inner connection, there's calm and there's clarity. So when you are like not calm, in that chaos, Overwhelmed, it means you're not in connection with yourself, which is also like a regulated nervous system, is another way of saying it.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're calm, you're connected, then you're calm, you've got clarity, and then you tap into creativity and more courage to move forward into the unknown. So these are always what I'm trying to come back into alignment to every day. But there's just one more piece with this, right? This is the invisible bit. This is very illogical now. So once we've sort of relaxed, released, I call it embody,
Mm-hmm.
connected into that creative zone, which tapping into what I like to call your wealth frequency, this inner genius, highly intelligent part of you, which is more feminine, you could say. It's more about your being, the power of being. And we are not taught this, right? So we're taught about doing, hustling, pushing, forcing. And yes, you can 100% create results from that place. And there is a place for a lot of action, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the bit that's the magical bit is when you are in the power of your being, not doing, and you're calm and connected, what starts to happen is we create a vortex of energy, which is about receiving from being. And this is where things become quite magical and mystical, and like we're like the serendipities and the synchronicity. And it's like, ooh, where did that come from? It just magically landed into my lap. You're nodding. I'm sure you've had one of these experiences, or it's like these, wow, I just thought of that person and there they are. So for me, it's very scientific because I can see energy and how it works. But what we can't see with the logic is the power of our being and our energy, what our energy does. And where energies are a bit like energetic roots, they're in communication and conversation with all of life. And it will start to attract in and draw in what you're in vibrational alignment with. So if you're attracting in a whole bunch of stuff that you are not enjoying, the work is to go and be like, what is going on inside of my energetic system that's either consciously or unconsciously attracting that in? It's not like you want it. We're manifesting all the time. So if there's something that you don't like, you want to be like, okay, how do I shift my state? What are my thoughts, emotions, energetic systems saying that's allowing that into my system? And what is the energetic alignment of what I do want? And how do I come into vibrational alignment with that? So you start to call in. For me, it's like more love and connection and safety and peace and opportunities and all these beautiful things. And so this is the bit that's super logical. But it's where we're kind of playing with the magical and the mystical, but you can't control that, right? That comes from letting go. And that is
Mm-hmm.
your thing, easier said than done. So I say we have to let go to let in. We have to
Mm.
to receive. And that needs space, and that needs you to relax and stop all the doing and the hustling and the busy being. And it is truly magical. And it doesn't, some things land fast, some things take time. But this is the bit, it's like the seed is underground, it's growing, but we can't see it. Roots are growing, things are happening. We just can't see it with our logical mind. And this is the really cool bit. This is where manifesting is super fun and super interesting and sometimes confusing. And then, of course, there's the action bit, right? Then we take aligned action. You've got to
Yep.
bridge that gap. You've got to also do stuff, but you want to make sure that you're taking action in alignment with what you want. Most people are just taking a lot of reactive action, and we just keep recreating the same things over and over, but we can't see how we're doing it because we're so in that kind of like, crazy brain momentum.
Yeah.
So it's the other bit that's really cool and kind of confusing, but also like it really does work, but it does need a practice and a discipline to get it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I love that thank you for bringing this up as we're coming to a close about bridging the gap between both, because there, again, so much information out there. And, even in my earlier years of starting to learn about manifestation and everything, there were so many people that are just like, you just dream about it and it comes. And I'm like, bull crap, and then there's other people that are just like, you just have to do, do, do. And it really is this beautiful, interconnected, weaving back and forth feeling that comes with understanding like how to be in that space of what you desire and who you are in that desire, and then paying attention to the symbols or the things that come up that you're like, oh, I need to go do that, or I need to go talk to that person, or I need to answer that email that just came through. So thank you, because I do believe that there is a beautiful weave between both. And I don't think that that is talked about as much when it comes to manifestation and understanding that there's a lot more to it than just dreaming everything up. So Yeah. Thank you, Laura. Please tell everybody, where they can find you, how they can connect with you. And then I also know that you have a freebie that you want to give to the audience as well.
Yes. Yes. And just to say, everything I share, I've absolutely learned the hard way, bashing my head against the brick wall. And I've been hyper fixated on how do we solve these problems. So it's taken me a long time to learn all this. But I really want to help you guys fast track so it doesn't need to take you 20 years. You can do it much faster. So I've got a, wealth of resources for you. And one of them is one of my abundance activations, which is a guided meditation essentially to take you through this step-by-step process. It's 20 minutes you can put aside every day. It's simple, it's short, but it's powerful. And so that's something you can start, just find 20 minutes to do this activation and start to train yourself into wealth. And so that's my freebie for you. But if you want to head over to my website, larawaldman.com, we have more support for you there. There's my podcast. Hopefully, Kat, you'll come on my podcast. And where I take you through my step-by-step process from the start of the podcast. I've just given everything away there. I'm on social media. I've got a lot of masterclasses and trainings and activations on my YouTube channel. I'm on Instagram, social media, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And we've got free online events. I've got my wealth retreat coming up, which is a free 5-day online event. Got master classes that are free. And then of course, we've got other kind of paid opportunities as well. But yeah, so come and hang out. Love to get to know you.
Yay. And of course, we'll have all that information in the show notes so you can find it super easily to be able to connect with Laura and get her guided meditation. I'm totally going to check it out. I love guided meditations. They are like, especially for somebody whose brain doesn't know how to be quiet or calm down at all sometimes, guided meditations are just amazing to be able to fixate your listening into. So, Laura, I can't thank you enough for being a part of the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing so much wealth and knowledge today.
My great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You are
And
so
have a
welcome.
beautiful rest of the day, everybody.
Yes, and to everybody else out there, I know that was a wealth of information, but I also know that what caught your attention is what you were meant to hear. So maybe go back and listen to that spot again and really fill into why you connected with that. Maybe this is your space. Maybe this is your part of the journey. Maybe this is the inspiration you've been looking for, or that little light bulb that's been like, I've been trying to shine bright, but you haven't been paying attention. So I strongly encourage you to take a listen, pay attention to what caught your attention, and lean into learning to trust yourself first and the outer world later. So until next time, do one thing positive for someone each and every day and see the difference that it makes in your life. Catch you later. Thank you so much for tuning in to Real Chat with Kat today, where real stories meet real solutions. If you loved today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review on Apple, and share this with someone who may also need to hear this as well. Let's also keep the conversation going. Follow me on socials at The Lotus Effect, connect with our incredible guests, and remember, you are never alone. Your story matters, and you have the ability and the power to rewrite it. You always have a choice. Until next time, stay strong, stay inspired, and keep showing up as the incredible, unstoppable